Hello and welcome to another AWS Tech Tip. My name is James Wynn and I'm a Principal Consultant working for an AWS consulting partner here in Australia. Today I would like to talk to you about how to RDP into Windows EC2 instances using Systems Manager. Historically, if you wanted to RDP into EC2 instances, such as a Bastion host, you might give it a public IP address and then create a security group which would only allow certain IPs or public IPs addresses to connect via RDP. Another way, you could have used AWS Systems Manager via the console, but this only gives you terminal access. AWS Systems Manager now allows you to proxy an RDP connection to an EC2 instance without even the instance needing to be in a public subnet. And here's how. Okay, so before we can set this up, there's a few prereqs we need to get. Obviously, we need a Windows instance running in your AWS account with internet connectivity via a NAT instance or a NAT gateway, or a AWS Systems Manager endpoint connected to the VPC. You'll need an IAM instance profile with Amazon SSM Managed Instance Core Policy attached. This will need to be attached to your EC2 instance. You'll need AWS Systems Manager agent installed and running on the instance. Then on the machine that you want to RDP into this instance from, i.e. your local machine, you'll need the AWS CLI installed and configured. And you'll also need the latest version of Systems Manager plugin for the AWS CLI installed on your local machine. Once you've set this up, you'll need a user to add to your or to configure in your CLI with it needs to at least have SSM start session access assigned to it. Okay, so let's get started with a demo. Okay, so let's jump over to the console here. We want EC2. Just need to make sure, oops, I'm not in the right region. So we'll put myself in the right region. Okay, cool, so back to EC2. There's my NAT instance, which will allow me to have internet access from the private subnet. So we're going to launch an instance. We're going to look for the Windows server base image, which is there. I'm just going to select a T2 medium. Okay, so now let's select the demo VPC, make sure we're putting it in a private subnet. As we don't want this instance to be publicly available. Okay, so now we're going to select, make sure we need to assign an IAM role, the SSM IAM role, to this instance. Everything else in here you can just leave blank if you want to. Okay, so storage, just keep that as the standard 30 gig. Let's give it a name as a tag. We'll call it RDP demo. That's fine. Security groups, I'll just assign a security group that I had pre-configured. It's just allowing access on that subnet. Launch. Yep, we'll use the demo key, but we won't need to use that key because we'll create a user later via Session Manager. Cool, so now we'll just wait for that to launch and we'll be right back. Okay, so it's now initializing. Should be ready. Okay, there we go. It's up and running. We've passed two of two checks. Awesome. Let's go to Systems Manager now. So first thing we need to do is create a user on a local user on the server that we're going to use to its credentials to connect via RDP. So we'll start a session now. As mentioned, we can access the server via the Session Manager here, but it will only give us console access. So what we'll do is we'll use some PowerShell commands to create a password and then store that. So we'll paste that command in, hit enter, and we'll now give it a password. Cool, so now we can actually run the PowerShell command to create the user. So we'll run that, call it demo user, and we're referencing the password we just entered for its password. Cool, that's done. So now I'm going to put this, I want this user to be part of the local admin group so that we can get some RDP access. So I'm just going to, for the purpose of the demo, so I'm just going to chuck it in the local admins group. Awesome, all done. We should be good to go with that user now. So now we can check to make sure we've set that up. Yep, so now we can get rid of this. Cool, so the rest of the that's it for here. We can go back to the instance. Where am I? Go back to instances, EC2. So we can see our instance, which is there. Cool. So we'll just need to make sure that we take note of the instance ID. The rest of this, I'm now in the shell on my local machine, just checking to make sure that I've got my user configured in AWS CLI, which I do. It's awesome. Now we need to go, as I mentioned earlier, go and copy the instance ID, because we'll need that instance ID to be referenced in the command we're going to use to create the connection, which is here. We're using the AWS SSM start session. We can see our target is our instance ID, and it's calling the start port forwarding session document, and then we've got we're going to be using a local port number and the destination port number. Cool. So we've now successfully initiated that connection with no errors, which is great. So it's now sitting there waiting for a connection. So we'll fire up our RDP client. So in here, we need to create a new one. We specify localhost and the port number, because that's the port number on localhost, which is now listening on. So we'll chuck that into the hostname or IP address. There we go. I'm just going to change the display so it doesn't fire up in full screen. Done. Cool. Add. Awesome. So now if we try and double click on that, it should fire up a connection. Cool, so now we can see that it's actually launched a connection and it's accepted for the session. So now we enter in the username and password of the user we created earlier. Pop that in there, make sure we get it right. Cool, so now we just need to wait for the session to connect. I think my internet is a little bit slow today. But we'll just wait for this to connect. Cool. Okay, so that's now, we'll accept the certificate. Now that we've done that, it should log us in. Here we go. We've got a remote desktop window. It's firing up, and here we go. We're now into our instance from our local machine. You see we've got full remote desktop access, so you can come in here and do what you need to do. If we go back to minimize that, we'll minimize this. We can see the connection is sitting there connected. So now if we go into from here, if we go look in Session Manager, under Systems Manager, we select the Session Manager. So here we can actually see that we have a session established. It's connected, it's given us the time and date when it connected. We can see it's using the start port forwarding session document, and it's all successfully connected. So that's how you can RDP to a Windows EC2 instance on a private subnet from your local machine. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've learned something today. See you next time.